So I bought a new Renault. Yes, another one, but there's a good reason for this. Now, before I reveal what this car is, here's a few clues. So it's a derivative of one of the best-selling Renaults in the late 90s and early noughties. It was a type of car Renault hadn't done much with before, and it's not a Clio V6 because it's a Renault Scenic RX-4. Now, before I tell you about this specific car, I'm going to give you a little bit of history. You see, the second car I ever had was a Mark 1 Scenic Phase 2, and I loved it so much that in 2011 I bought an RX-4. Now, it is a 2-litre petrol in Sport Elise trim, and it was in a sort of bluey purple colour, which I can't remember, but it was a really nice colour. I owned that car 4 hours before I got it stuck in the Yorkshire Dales for 8 hours. You see, I bought the car in Teesside, met up with some friends in the Yorkshire Dales, and then we drove some of the tracks that we used to do when we were a bit younger. And as these things go, we were having a great time, everything was hunky-dory until one of us said, just one more track. So we went and did a track, the track sort of disappeared, and then I tried to turn around on what I thought was a patch of gravel, but actually was pretty much a bog, and the car just sunk. So with no reception, we wandered to the nearest farm. They came out with a Defender, tried to recover the car, got stuck themselves, and then a tractor had to come out and put us both out. And I ended up getting home in the East Midlands very late. Now, it didn't start particularly well, but I actually did a lot more off-roading after that in the RX-4, and it was incredibly capable. I was really surprised, and I had a lot of fun. I even did about a third of the Viking Way, which is one of the most, I think it's the longest green lane actually in the UK. And I will be maybe trying to do that again in this RX-4, as well as some other off-roadiness, because it is a surprisingly capable car. Now, let's talk about this specific car and why I've bought it. Well, firstly, I think the RX-4 is brilliant, and there aren't many left. There's probably less than 100 still on the road in the UK, which is a shame because it is brilliant. So I felt like I had to buy one, I had to save one, and I had to preserve one. And I specifically wanted a Fiji model, which is the run-out version of the standard Scenic, which they also did on the RX-4. And this one came up, and I just had to have it. So I do plan on keeping this in the long run, and I've got quite a bit of work to do with it. So it is a 1.9 diesel engine, the only other engine you can get, which is the 2-litre petrol engine, which I've already had. It's only got 105 horsepower and 200 newton meters of torque, which is nothing, but it does actually suit the car quite well. It's not actually that heavy as 4x4 standards go. Now, this is a late RX-4, and the later cars had coloured plastic trim. So the early ones you probably remember having black plastic. The later Scenics, they started sort of colour coding the plastic trim, and they did the same on the RX-4. So on this green colour, which I think suits it very well, it's sort of got a sort of nature-ness about it. The trim comes in this sort of metallic silver. If you had a pale blue RX-4, which was one of the later colours, then you got blue plastic. And if you had a red Scenic, which I would have loved to have, you get red plastic trim. I do think it makes it look a bit more modern than the earlier cars. A couple of other things about the later RX-4. So firstly, the wheel design is unique to the RX-4 because the RX-4 has a 5-stud arrangement. And these are the wheels that came on the later cars, which I think look quite a lot more modern. And also, if you've seen many RX-4s, you'll notice that the spare wheel tends to be covered. Now, again, with the later cars, they actually removed the cover, which I think is a shame because I really do like how it was covered, but I suppose it makes it look a bit more off-roady with the exposed wheel. So I'll do a proper feature-length review of the RX-4 when I've tarted it up a bit. But why have I bought one? What makes it so special? So I think it's just another example of that time in Renault's history, which is around the early noughties, where they were just sort of like, what if? And they just threw money at creating new types of vehicles and just not taking no for an answer, and just probably going too far for cars that were never going to sell or make a return. Now, you think this would just be a Renault Scenic with 4-wheel drive, but it's a lot more than that. Firstly, Renault didn't actually have a 4-wheel drive system to fit to the Scenic, even though they had cars like the Saffron Bi-Turbo and the Espace Mark 1 Quadra. They didn't have anything to fit to the Scenic, so they had to pay someone, which was Sterpuck, who developed the Panda 4x4 and the G-Wagon, to develop a 4-wheel drive system for it. And you'll also find that 4-wheel drive system on the Kangoo 4x4. Now, fitting a 4-wheel drive system to a car never designed to have one is not an easy undertaking, and they didn't exactly find the easy way to do it. So firstly, they've had to develop an all-new rear suspension setup for it because they've had to fit a rear differential. That also then displaced the rear wheel, and instead of just having a rear wheel in the boot or just fitting a space saver or just a pump and goo kit, they decided to mount it to the tailgate. But the tailgate was never designed to take a rear wheel. So they've then had to develop a whole new method for opening the rear tailgate. They've gone for this split tailgate design, which is just overly complicated. And they just were asking for trouble with it. And it's introduced loads of new panels and things that it didn't need. They even had to fit an electronic tailgate release when the standard car didn't have it. Now there's also then jacked up suspension, and there are 5 lug wheels. So they've had to fit and develop new hubs for the Scenic RX4, which aren't standard with the standard Scenic. They are 4-bolt pattern. These are 5-bolt pattern. So again, just something else they've just gone with. And then they had to apply all this cladding to hide some of the wider track, but to give it a bit more beefiness. Inside, the Scenic is actually very similar to the RX4. There's not really much uniqueness apart from some sill plates, but it's just the engineering effort they've got into this. The four-wheel drive system is actually a viscous coupling, so it is predominantly front-wheel drive, but it still doesn't mean it's not capable. And the commitment to it, I mean, look at the ground clearance and the geometry. It's like a proper off-roader. It's actually better than a Freelander. And they've also fitted a sump guard, so if that does not suggest some intent, then I don't know what does. I just love that commitment, and I think it's a shame that these cars have died a death, really. So why did I seek out a Fiji model in particular? Well, it's mostly because of inside here. Most of the changes are to the interior. And if you've ever been in a Mark 1 Twingle, you know that they're quite famous for having lots of coloured buttons and trim, and Renault deployed the same strategy in the Fiji version of the Scenic, but this time they chose a rather cool coppery metallic-y orange to apply everywhere. You'll find it on the window switches, the bonnet release, the front seat adjustment, the gear lever, the grab handle on the seat, and even the rear seats adjustment handles and the seat belt runners or holes that they go through. And it's even actually on the roof for the buttons for the sunroofs and the interior lights. Not just that, the trim is also finished in this sort of metallically grey, so the internal door handles, the door mirror switches, and a few other bits as well. So it is really quite unique, but they didn't just stop there because the seats are also unique to the Fiji model. And they've got these sort of black and white colour scheme to them, where the white bits, or I suppose light grey bits, are sort of like suede-y, and then you've got this really cool sort of fabric, black fabric, on the rest of the seats. And I think it's just really cool. It's by far the best interior, I think, unless you have one of those really quirky Mark 1 Scenics with the different coloured seats, like the concept car. So yeah, and not just that, they also got unique dials, which I think are really cool. Again, sort of orange needles and orange text, and it just gives it a much more sort of modern, but also sort of outdoorsy vibe, even though they use the same dials on the standard Scenic. Now, the Fiji wasn't the top spec version. It didn't get things like climate control or the leather seats. It's actually based on the Expression specification, but it's still really good in here. You've got rear electric windows, you've got the electric dual sunroofs, you have a CD player, and you've got aircon. So it's relatively well specified for a car of this age. Now let's talk specifically about this RX4 and what is needed. Now the first thing is I've already replaced these upper struts, so there's no fear of me being hit on the head, and I've replaced a CV joint on the front axle. But the main thing I need to do is make this car an RX4, because you see it's actually an RX2 at the moment. The prop shaft has been removed, and it's quite a common thing because the prop shaft bearings aren't replaceable. So when they start making noises, people just remove the prop shaft and throw it away. So I've got to buy a prop shaft. I think there might also be a leak on the rear diff. I'm not pointing to me, I'm pointing under there, that I might need to address before I make it a proper four-wheel drive car. I also want to fit some proper mud and snow tyres to it. I need to find a centre cap on one of the wheels, and I also need to get a new CD player because that doesn't work. And there's some other things like I think the trot rod ends need doing. The brakes are a little crusty on the front, so I need to change them to make sure it drives as it should. And some of the bodywork needs tidying up as well. Some of the paint has peeled off the front bonnet. I should be able to hopefully get one off another standard Scenic, because this colour is common with the standard car. And I need to sort of tidy up some of this plastic trim and paint the underside of the front bumper as well. Another thing I need to do, which hopefully will be quite cheap to do but will make a massive difference, is tidy up the interior. The suede has gone all bitty on the seats. The orange trim I mentioned has this sort of rubber coating which Renault loved to apply in the early noughties. New, it makes everything feel really nice and expensive. Over time it just absorbs all the cleaning materials, all the grease on your hands, and it just goes all grubby. So I just need to remove that, really. Problem is that some of the switches have graphics printed onto that rubber coating, so unfortunately I'm going to have to lose them unless I find another way of reapplying those graphics to things like the sunroof buttons. And it just needs a proper clean. So if you can help me with things like a new CD player for a Mark 1 Scenic or a center cap for an RX4, then I would love to hear from you. And one of the most obvious things that you can probably see that I haven't mentioned is the missing fuel flap. Again, unique to the RX4 because it's part of the cladding, and I don't necessarily have to find it in this colour, because hopefully I'll find the colour of this trim and I can paint it, but it is something I need to find. And surprisingly, seems to be a common issue on the standard Scenic and the RX4s, that the fuel flaps just fall off or get removed or get knocked. I don't know. But it's something that I need to sort out because it's really obvious. And then when I have sorted out a few things, and I would love to take this off-roading, I'd love to take it to shows, maybe it's worthy for the Festival of Being Exceptional, and maybe some Renault car events as well. But I do plan on keeping it because I think it's an absolutely brilliant, underappreciated car, and I think people need to remember them. Oh, and one last thing, you can see how overly complicated this side opening tailgate is. The weight it's supporting with that rear wheel, even though the actual body coloured panel is plastic, is quite heavy, and I think it has dropped slightly, so I need to find a way of adjusting that, and probably this strut needs replacing as well. So stay tuned, maybe follow my Instagram for updates, and then I'll issue a few more videos on the RX4. Thanks for watching.